This episode is dedicated to Theo Jameson and Jack Burke. We love and miss you both. Sara Burke, welcome to Speak Up St. Louis.
Thank you, Quinton. Thank you for having me.
Well, first, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Obviously, for ourselves, we've known each other for a bit now, and so this is a really great opportunity as mentor and mentee to share in this moment, but then also to talk about all the different things that you are doing from not only the arts, not only just a level of arts leadership, but also within power building and sharing with other leaders that will be the next people in these positions and places. And so it's just really exciting to have this full circle moment to be able to know where our relationship started, now being able to share in this moment of the podcast and seeing where that grows, and to kind of look at that in, I guess, somewhat its entirety, because there will be new fellows soon, but also to be able to take a step back and understand the journey that it took for you to get here, and all the work that you've done in helping build up the next generation of leaders as well, too.
Wow. Is that me, really?
Yes, that is you.
Thank you. It is the full circle in the sense that I interviewed you.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I didn't even think about that.
I was thinking that when you were talking. It's like, oh, this must have been what it felt like to be Quinton. But it's a full circle, and I'm really happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. And so I think, we'll get into some of the other things around Miss Dunham and other, and all the other things that we'll talk about today. But I guess for the listeners, if you want to talk about, what the Katherine Dunham Fellowship is, how it started, why, let's start there.
Great. Well, the first thing probably would help is to know that I danced in East St. Louis with Katherine Dunham. I had the privilege of doing that in the 70s, and I can talk more about it later, but I was, asked ultimately to be in the company. And it was an extraordinary experience, and I learned so much, and I almost felt like it was such a privilege. I almost felt I had such humility because of it, and it was such a privilege to learn to dance this technique that is all anthropology based, but took in all these different cultures and yet had ballet and modern. And Katherine Dunham is often referred to as the mother of black dance, which she didn't love that, but she wanted to be known as classical as well. But when I first went over there, and I'll get back to the fellowship, but it might make more sense to sort of know how I got to the fellowship.
For sure.
When I first went over in the 70s, I had heard that she was building a center in East St. Louis, and she had a home in Haiti, and she had a magnificent dance company in New York. But it got disbanded. Quickly, the reason it got disbanded is that she did a piece of choreography called Southland, which really we should all know and talk about. And Southland is really an opera in 3 parts, and it depicts very violently and vibrantly the hanging of young black boys in the South. And so she did it in Peru, and then she was on her way to do it in Paris with her company, and the State Department shut it down. And they took her passport, and she couldn't get any more grants. So ultimately, her company folded. And it was just a really tragic experience, I think. Her company had been performing many, many years, and this was kind of her big hurrah. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it was her last hurrah when it came to touring. So knowing all of that, here I am, this white girl from Green Bay, Wisconsin, where really the only people of color might have been a football player. And I am so privileged to be able to take this technique. And the way I got to East St. Louis, because I really didn't know how I was going to get there. I mean, was I going to go and knock on Miss Dunham's door? I don't think so. So I lived in Laclede, which was an experiment in integrated living. So there was a black house, a white house, house front, an immigrant house, an African house. And you couldn't have two white people in the same house next to each other.
Real quick, just for folks that don't know, can you go a little bit more into where Laclede Town is? Because we understand, most people understand that, but most people won't know that that is a neighborhood that is no longer where it is.
Yeah, it's the Mill Creek Valley, and Vivian Gibson did a wonderful book about the lost children of Mill Creek Valley, which I urge anyone to read. And now it's also right where Harris Stowe State University is. But at the time, it was, it's written all up. You can Google it. It was utopia. It was like the most extraordinary experience. It was life-changing, and so was my life with the Dunham Company. But Laclede Town was completely life-changing, and so we had a community center. And in this community center, I heard these drums, and remember, I'm trying to get to East St. Louis. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, but I'm determined to find a way. So I hear this incredible drums, kunga drums, and I walked in, and I'm like, oh my God! And there was sort of like an African small dance company dancing, and then there was the drummer, whose name is Morsham, whose son happens to be Akon. But anyway, Morsham and I just became extremely good friends, and I was like, why are you here? And he said, well, Madame Dunham brought me over from Dakar, Senegal, to work with her rhythms and train the drummers for the tours and so on. I was like, are you kidding? Oh my God. So I'm like, how do I get him to take me there? Because Morsham knew her very well, and she picked him to come here. And I am like, okay, certainly he's going to take me. So I said, I really want to learn how to dance Dunham technique. I'm a ballet trained dancer, but I really like to learn. And he was like, well, tell me a little bit more about yourself. And I was like a wreck. I was a nervous wreck. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I speak French. So that helped because I knew that he spoke French. So it was like, So we just had a long talk, and he said he would get back to me, and he walked me home because it was Laclede Town. Next day, he stopped by, and he was like, get in the car. And I'm like, oh, my God. And he took me to meet Miss Dunham, and when we walked in, she had 3 homes, and they were all beautiful, and she lived in the middle. And it was this beautiful home, and she has a lot of assistants. So people open the door, come in, and they kind of looked at me like, now, who is she? So he said, well, she's authorized. So I went, and you kind of wait for her. You don't just, you know what I mean? She doesn't wait for you. So you come in, and I was with Morsham, we were in her parlor, and there was all this beautiful art, from Africa and all over her travels, South America. And we wait, but it was because it was Morsham. She didn't wait too long, so she comes sweeping in, just sweeping, like this ultimate diva dancer. And she sat down in the most great, and she wasn't that young then, in this most grateful way. She just sat down, and she just kind of didn't say anything. And I'm like, oh man, because you never know. She could say go, but then she said, she introduced. It was so weird. She was like, hi, I'm Katherine Dunham. And it's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm like, oh my God. So then, I introduced myself because like an idiot, I was like, oh, well, what do I do now? And then Morsham, within 5 minutes, leans over and says to me, okay, I'll be back. I'm going to run. I'll be back to get you. I'm like, no, you can't. Don't leave me here alone with Miss Tom, please. And he goes, you'll be fine. So he leaves. Do you want me to keep doing this story? Because this is a little involved.
Hold on. Yeah, keep going. This is good storytelling. I like this.
Well,
I think everybody's into it.
It was such a privilege. So we sit in, then somebody brings tea, and I honestly, I felt like I might pass out because she had this aura about her, and I already knew that she was a high priestess of voodoo, Haitian voodoo, but she had this aura around her that was really powerful, really powerful. So we chatted, and we had tea, and I said to her, I was so nervous. I would kill to learn Dunham technique. And she was like, well, I wouldn't go that far. I was like, okay. And she said, well, let me show you something first. So we get up, we go into her kitchen, this big, big room. And on the wall is this huge map of the world, but plastered like art, with stick pins in. Stick pins on the places she will never perform again, where, her people, as she said to me, couldn't get in the same door, had to sit upstairs, where she protested and left in the South. And so in the South, there were heavy, heavy white, there were a lot of white pins. And the rest of the map was stunning, because it was like all the places that she had been welcomed, that she had been, it was amazing. So I'm just standing there, I'm thinking, I have no words, I really don't know what to say to this. And she was like, okay, so I just want you to understand that this is what my dance life has been. It has been a constant struggle. But if you can't do it through the arts, Sara, you really cannot do it. You just can't. It's the only way I see that you can make change. All the arts. And so I was just like, whoa. So she motioned me, to sit back down, and we went back into the parlor. And then I had already asked her, if I could join, if I could come to just take classes. And they were in East St. Louis, next to SIUE, East St. Louis, in this beautiful, building. Of course, it's torn down now, but anyway, so she said to me, this was just so powerful. And she said, Sara, you may take classes at my invitation because I believe you're really sincere. But I want you to know you will be the only white person. And secondly, more importantly, when you come here, that river for us is an ocean. And I don't ever want you to forget that. And every time you come here for classes, you say to yourself, I'm crossing the ocean. Because you can go back and, it's your world. And you come here and it's another story. And you also have to be humble and, just realize that this is not something you may be used to. Well, anyway, so that's that. Do you want me to go back to Southland? No. Okay, I'm good. But anyway, so that's how where I was going with that, though, is I was so impacted by my experience. For example, in the beginning, a lot of the movements were cultural expression. So it might be, a dropped apple, and you do this with your body, contract. And anyway, there was an advanced class that I had, gotten into or was asked to be into, that there was something, right in the middle of choreography, there was a section where the movement was picking cotton, where you literally, and the movement was beautiful, and I could have done the movement, but I could not have understood it. So I stepped out. I'm humiliated and I'm sad and it's awful, but I can't do this. And I went over to her, and I told her that, Miss Dunham that, and she was like, that's what I was hoping. I was hoping you would step out. And so that was a powerful moment.
So real quick, just because you kind of got into that some, so if you could explain Dunham technique, because you just kind of talked about it as the contraction of the body, as the contortions, and it's a lot of different movements. But could you explain more deeply what it means to actually do it? What is the feeling that comes from it? Because hearing from other elders and the videos and things like that, it is a very raw, sometimes maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a visceral experience to a certain degree. And so can you explain what that felt like, its meaning, and the level of depth that comes with actually doing Dunham technique?
Such a good question, Quinton. One of the things that Katherine Dunham said all the time was Dunham technique is a way of life. And that was really impounded in our brains and our bodies. It was like you have to learn a language. I mean, she took people out of prison and invited them to take classes, but you had to learn a language. You had to learn to drum from Meerschaum. I mean, my hands were just raw from my drum lessons.
It was a full experience.
Yeah, and for me, it was like, whoa.
But a life experience.
It was
as
a
well.
life experience that was life-changing. And you really had to do, and you had to learn, you had to really understand the world around you. You couldn't be narrow-minded, and it was so fascinating how she would just talk about it as a way of life. And the elders that she brought, well, they weren't elders at the time, but she brought Mr. Savage and Mr. Davis from Italy, and they had been in her company, and they dropped everything. They both had dance companies in Italy. They dropped everything to come and be with her in East St. Louis. This is the kind of power she had, and adoration. I mean, anybody would do anything for her at any time because she was so groundbreaking. There was no one like her. But so the technique was a way of life. It was interesting because as a white person doing it, there were many times where it was a bridge too far. We're like, oh, okay, again, not as bad as picking cotton. That was way out there. But the technique, it just used your whole body way differently than modern dance or ballet. It was so much more internal, than other dance styles, because you had to feel everything. If you didn't feel, because the movement had meaning, and if you didn't feel, like there were things called Django and all these different kinds of choreography that she put on us that were just like mind-blowing. And also, you really had to understand the anthropology of the dance, the costume. Her husband, John Pratt, was her costume designer. And costumes were very important to her because it really was, expression of your movement. So that's the main thing, was that, and to this day, it really is a way of life. I mean, all of us in the Dunham world are very close.
So it seems as well, too, is that Miss Dunham had a very intentional idea around this idea of holistic learning and living, to the point of what you're saying, because it's not just the dancers she impacted, because it's much larger than that. It's the community members that she's also impacted, not just here in East St. Louis or in St. Louis, but around the world. So you gave the example of the people that were that she had that got out of prison to come and learn from the classes as well too. But also when you were talking about, it's the understanding of history, it's the understanding of healing, it's the understanding of ideating, because you're having to learn how to put these things together. It's all these different things in connection with one another that make Dunham technique what it is. So it's never just the movement itself.
Perfect.
Which I don't know why I just like.
That's really good. Can I borrow that?
Sure.
Thank you. No, that's a great way to put it. I mean, you ingested what I said in a really good way.
I don't know why, but it's really interesting. Another full circle moment. I don't know why. As soon as I said that, it just reminded me of Antoinette and what she does with Creative Reaction Lab, just in the sense of this multi-layered learning that allows for that next level of thought and expression. And so, shout out to Antoinette.
Yeah.
Katie Fellow #1.
Yeah. Okay. Good job, Antoinette.
And so it's, so you're a lot of what you're talking about is not only just the presence, but is also that sense of legacy as well too. And so it's, and so when I look at yourself, or when I think of Keith, or when I think of Theo, who's now passed, I think those are the only, I probably have met some others. Angie as well too. I think that's really important to what you're talking about, in that sense of, and I think that's something that I definitely see across the board, of like the connectivity that you all have, but also the way that you all carry your all selves. Like even thinking about the first time that I met Theo.
I miss him so much.
And just, one of the things that Theo had reminded me of was like, just making sure that whatever you do and represent, make sure you do it to the best of your ability. And I just remember that very clearly, of like, what you stand for is so much more than just yourself. And I think those are some of the things that are passed down because obviously most of the fellows are not dancers and things like that. Some
Sadly,
are.
no.
Oh my God!
Just kidding.
But there's but it's because it was, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like when I hear you talk about it, it was so much bigger than dance, and so that's why I'm getting at is like, to be able to pass that on to others was more than just about dance, but it was about a level of leadership and understanding of how does one not only take care of each other, but also how one takes care of the larger community, because we know that's what Miss Dunham was about, was
Exactly.
taking care of others.
Exactly. In her home in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, she bought Josephine Bonaparte's mansion, and part of it she dedicated to, the poor for hospital and all these things. So she was always working within whatever community she was affected by. She was the real deal. And I was going back to just the fellowship. I will say that I hear her voice a lot. So, for example, I won't name boards, but I've been on different boards where I'm horrified. I'm just like, how can all these white people sit here and make these decisions with no one at the table that has any, I guess I'll get like a rage about this, and I'm not exactly I'm a little bit of a militant, so to put me on a board is kind of like, oh Lord, she's a loose cannon, which I am, but I am on purpose.
Right.
Because sometimes I don't feel like we have a lot of time. And I'm getting to the point where I've worked at this so hard. I have like heard her voice. I have like begged people, have friends. What is your table? I always ask people, what does your dinner table look like? If it looks like you, there's a problem. That's where the change can be. I mean, everyone has a gay relative, but not everyone has a black friend or an Asian friend. Oh, am I on my soapbox now?
No, you're fine. You're all good. And I think I have a colleague, her name is Beverly Isom, and one of the things she told me, and I think it's to what you're saying too, is that there's a difference between, she said there's two types of people. There's some people that can wear it, but they just wear it for work and it doesn't, and they can take it off. But it's another thing when it's inside of you. It's another thing then it's like when the things that you are fighting for, when you're looking for that sense of equity, when you're looking to make the changes, what that means in its entirety. And so I think that is really important to understand, like, who are the decision makers? And do the decision makers reflect or have any relationship to the community members that we are trying to serve?
Who are you? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I met you when you were like not this cool, and now you're really cool.
Wasn't this cool
No,
back
but
then?
I mean, you are.
This is
you put it
podcasting
perfectly.
cue.
You put it perfectly. No, what you said is so true, because I think the reason the fellowship's been really important to me, but I certainly have received more love and joy from it than I have ever given. But years ago, I don't really think I should say that. Well, yeah, I mean, I was a commissioner at the Regional Arts Commission. And the Dunham people would write to the mayor. It was Mayor Slay at the time. And they go, you need to keep her on there because she cares. And and I'm going, okay, let's, they would cause me trouble all the time, my Dunham dancers. They were always doing things to embarrass me. So, but I was at the Regional Arts Commission, and every session there'd be new interns. And all the interns, I am not kidding you, were white. They were white, white, white. So I am like, well, this is a problem. So the board, the commission was pretty white too, who am I kidding? But so I'm like, okay, what is the deal here? So I realized, because race and class are so intertwined, that not only was it race, but it was class. I mean, white kids can stay at home, they can do a free internship because it's not paid, and their parents will take care of them or whatever. And so I was like, well, what? And I went to the director at the time, the executive director, and I said, what if we paid? Well, we can't pay our interns. We don't have any money. And, I said, well, can we do a grant? No, we can't do that. And I said, okay, well, let me think about this. So then I talked to Jack, and I came back a day later, and I said, okay, I want to run these numbers by you. What would it cost to have a paid intern designated for a fellowship that I will fund, and I like to name after Katherine Dunham? And so it was interesting. Oh, you don't want to name it after yourself? I'm like, no, I've done nothing. Why would I do that? So we ended up, so it started at RAC. And then from RAC, we moved it to A&E for a different kind of experience, which is where you came to be interviewed. And now it's with Antoinette. So it was my way of looking at the power differences and seeing young people who were extraordinary not get chances. Because my goal was to get, and it's getting better, was to get people, young black people especially, in positions of administrative power. Not dancers, where the decisions are made, where you're at the table, you're making the decision, and you have a decision to hire people who look like you.
Specifically in the art world, correct?
Specifically, arts administration.
Yeah, because I know that was really
It
important
was
for you.
really important to me.
Yeah, within the different spaces. And so I guess, what were your original thoughts when the fellowship started, and to now see what it's grown to in the sense of the individuals that have come into the fellowship? You know, obviously, we're all doing really great things.
You are.
And so kind of how does, when you take that full perspective of what the fellowship has done, how does that in line with the legacy that you wanted for it in regards to it being named after Miss Dunham?
I think the legacy is intact in the sense that I realized that at some point I did not want to be the face of this fellowship, that it should be run, it should be taken over by, a woman or a man of color to run this. So my husband and I, really talked a long time about talking to Antoinette. So Antoinette was number one. And go back to answer your question, because I know I'm all over the place, but Antoinette, it was just a fluke. The marketing director at the time at RAC had met her and knew her story and was so touched and moved by her life challenges. And I always said this about Antoinette, her life would have defeated me. It would have totally defeated me. Everything this woman has done has been a testament to, dedication, inspiration. I mean, I could start crying. I really could. I love this girl. So anyway, it turns out that the marketing director said, well, would you be willing not to, because we were going to wait a year and get it organized and put out information, let the St. Louis American, everybody know about it. But she was like, do you think you could fund it right now? And I was like, well, of course. And so she said, well, I want you to meet Antoinette. And I met her in the hallway at the Regional Arts Commission, and that was it. I didn't even, it was just yes, because we had a talk, and in some ways that's a good way to do it, is rather than ask interview questions, just kind of like what we're doing, have a conversation. And she was so extraordinary. So that's how that happened. And then now we have that full circle, because Antoinette, of course I'm still funding it. And of course, knowing Antoinette, she didn't want just one, now she wants two, for the same period. So I'm like, okay. But so now Antoinette's the face of it, and she's curating it, and I'm really not that involved. I just will let them, talk with them about my experiences with Miss Dunham and so on, but that's it. Besides Miss Dunham, she brought Mr. Savage in, as I mentioned, and he really was a mentor. And that's the other thing I really want to say to people is, you can mentor anyone for free. You don't need to write a check. You don't need to have a corporation behind you. You simply can mentor people, especially if you're older and you've had experiences and you want to get people at the table. You just mentor. That's my clarion call. But, so Mr. Savage was this extraordinary dancer, very tall, kind of like Theo, extraordinary dancer, mover, and a great chef. So late at night in East St. Louis, he would have, so I was maybe a little too thin at this time, and he would always want to feed me. So he had this really old house full of character. And he would sew and everything, but you'd walk in, and this may be where I got the love of being in the dark. You'd walk in for dinner, or he would just say, come over right now, and you come over. You walk up these kind of beaten up stone steps, you get in there, and it's completely dark. The first two rooms have no light, and then you go back into the kitchen where there's light and the table, and he's cooking, and you're having food, and Theo's there, and Keith's there, and Mr. Davis is there, and Mr. Morris, the first black ballet master in this country, who we also learned from, which, can you imagine? Linwood Morris. But everyone was a character. So as hard as we danced and as disciplined as we were, we could drink, we could tell great stories, we could get high, we could just have, laugh. We just had the best times, and we would always be eating.
Always.
Yeah, you're right. But then,
I feel like that's no different than when the Dunham Fellows get together and everybody gets together
right,
now.
right, and we'd always have silly, but that's not what happened. This is what happened. And we always have stories about her greens were better, his greens are better.
That's still a conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's an ongoing conversation. We have to take votes. Yeah, it was extraordinary, as you can tell. This experience.
Right, and I think to what you were just saying too, just the impact of mentorship, and understanding, it for somebody to get to the next place that they're trying to get to, they need somebody else along the way. And I think that's just really important to what you're talking about. So, for you all, it was Miss Dunham, and then for the Dunham elders and for yourself, especially for the KD fellows, it was yourself, it was Keith, it was Theo, it was Angie, Leslie as well too,
yeah.
and so many other people. And so just that reminder of that, I think, is really important to make sure that we're not just gaining for ourselves, but I think it goes back to what you're talking about, which power sharing. At what point do you just realize, at what point do you realize it's, I don't know if it's a thing of realization of or if it's something that you just step into per se, in regards to power sharing, because I think it's important to what you were talking about, in the sense of how do you begin to build, how do you begin to build the future? How do you begin to build what you want your communities in your organizations to look like?
That's such a good point. Well, I think one of the things that's always motivated me is when you sit at the feet of people who could not dance, who where they dance, they could not eat or sleep. You literally have the privilege of hearing these stories, and they're so horrifying. And you can't understand it. Why would these extraordinary, really, really accomplished people and dancers obviously go through this incredibly racist experience in this country and beyond? So that's always been like a trigger for me. And as I got more involved in the arts and have been asked to be on more boards and do more things, I constantly looked around and I was like, this is so unrepresentative. And the mentoring, I think, just came because it was something that, I feel anyone could do. But for me, the big moments were times where I would literally bring someone to the table. And one of the people, I won't name who it is, who I brought to the table is now president of the Board of Rec. And I literally gave up a power to give her power to do something, to be involved in this big community at RAC. And she was so fabulous that she became a commissioner. And then from there, she's now, chairman of the commission. So I couldn't be more proud. And she's sort of like an honorary Katherine Dunham. I'm talking about Andrea Purnell. And I have to say, she blows my mind. She had this, I said, here, take this, because I was given the choice of, do you want to stay on this? If you want to stay on the selection committee, you can't both be on it. And I wanted to be on that selection committee so bad. But I said to myself, okay, do you mean what you say? Because Andrea is young, and she doesn't look like the rest of this committee, and she needs to be at that table. And I said, I step back, I want her on, instead of me, I want her. And those are the things that white people specifically have to do. They have to let go of their power because it's bullshit. I'm sorry, can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that.
But it just is. It's like people are so old and so white, and they're hanging onto these tables with their veins are showing, and they're so, they just will not, you have to take their hand off like claws. Now, what is the point of that? I think the most beautiful thing you can do as a white person, is to just provide an opportunity and get out of the way. And when I see you guys, all of you Dunham Fellows, all I wanted was, to have a bench, where you would just take care of each other. And I get so jealous that you don't even call me anymore. We're all doing things, and Sarah's doing grants for Creative Reaction Lab. You're doing a million things. Aaron's doing whatever. You're all over the place, but you always care about each other. It's a beautiful cohort. It's everything I would have wanted. I mean, I could die a happy person, like right now, if you wanted to shoot
Oh
me.
my
Right?
gosh.
No, I mean, because it's an extraordinary thing to see you guys really take these moments and run with it, and beyond anything I would have imagined. Well, that's not really true.
There's still a lot. We still got a ways to go.
Yeah, but you're getting there.
Yeah.
And you're all getting there, and you're so helpful to each other. It's like the Dunham family almost, only it's the Dunham Fellow family.
Right. But that's what I was getting to, is that connection between, the things that were happening for yourself, learning from Miss Dunham in that community, and now being able to step back and watch a new community being able to blossom and grow within each other, I think it's just really powerful. So to shift gears a little bit, though, to go back to, because you were talking more about just like, different arts organizations, not really wanting to get into that, but just more so of the state of art in St. Louis, because I know that you've been a part of a lot of different things. You are invested into a lot of different things as well, to regards to organizations and seeing more diversity in not just within the decision-making process, but also within the actual arts itself. And so I guess I just was curious on, your thoughts on where the current state of the arts is, the culture of art in St. Louis, and more so where you would like to see it go.
Well, that's a profound question. Let me see if I have a profound answer. That's very multi-layered.
It is. It's probably more than one question.
Good news. I mean, if you had asked me this even 8 years ago, I would have said, there's no hope. But there is, and some of the changes I've seen in terms of work of art have been things, especially opera theater. They've done Champion, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and both of which were composed by Terence Blanchard. They were Black stories, and they were original, which is mind-blowing, and that gave chance for all these great opera singers to have a platform to sing. And just now they're doing Truman Shot, which Katherine Dunham did in 1972 in Atlanta. And Angie danced in that, right. And so so that's very, I think what opera theater does in their leadership, especially Kim Eberline, she really cares. So that is a real bright light for us.
So I think that also touches on the amount of new Black women leadership that we have in our arts organizations here in St. Louis. And so there's several new organizations that have been that have been doing new things. And so I think that is exciting when we're talking about where St. Louis is headed, not just as a city, but also as an art city as well, too. Wasn't there a recent article that was written about, wasn't that Forbes or something, that was talking about St. Louis art culture?
Right, it was a lovely article.
Right, and so I think it is in part because of the leadership, especially in particular Black women leadership that we have in St. Louis. Our arts organization or art exhibitions or anything wouldn't thrive without some of these different places and as being anchor institutions.
Absolutely, and even, boards, as much as that's not, everybody thinks boards is where the power is, but really, if you're running the organization, you have a lot of power, even though it doesn't seem like it. But I really do think that there have been some good things, but the one thing that I think has been a little bit disturbing is that, and it's been around the country, so these organizations hire, let's say, these incredible Black women, and the boards, everybody wants to, this is where we're going with our organization. And then what happens? The tickets get canceled. People don't want to do their season tickets. Everything's different. The old guy was here 30 years, the old white guy that we knew what he would put on the stage. And so people are progressive in what they think, but they don't follow through in what they do. And I think that's an important thing for those of us who want to support more diverse leadership, that we understand that we have to, buy more tickets, bring more people, and support on the ground, not just support the idea.
What was because we went to Coca. They had put on, it was opera theater, they had put on the show at Coca. What was that called?
The New Works.
The New Works.
Yes.
I thought that was really amazing.
Didn't we have a great time?
It was a great time.
It was a great time.
But I think, to that point of, looking around at Coca to see all the people, all the diverse individuals that were there for that, because it wasn't just the traditional opera show. It was a 3-part series, all different operas all together telling diverse stories. So one was talking about, I think it was the story of a kid that went to, was it the Griot Museum?
The Griot Museum, right.
And seeing all the different iconic Black women leaders that were here in St. Louis. The other one was one of a story around, what was it? It was an Asian story about
whether you could use a bad word,
a racial slur.
A racial slur.
Does a racial slur work? Can a racial slur be used within the community of that context?
Right, and it was brought before the Supreme Court, and somebody played Ruth Bader Ginsburg on stage. Yeah, that was right.
And then the last one was, it was Harlem, New York.
Yeah.
It was an individual that moved from down south to Harlem,
right.
And became, like, what was it?
A drag entertainer.
Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was but it was timely because of what's happening with drag shows.
Right.
Yeah, good synopsis.
But that was really powerful because
Very.
it was not one just exciting to see new stories that traditionally are not shown in opera, but more so this sense of challenging individuals on their biases as well too. And I think that is a part of it as much as, of like what you're talking about with art and Ms. Dunham. It's challenging the narrative, it's challenging your personal perspective and getting you into a place to be more open about the things that are happening around you.
Totally. And when I look back on that, because we went, in full disclosure, we went together. The representation just really blew my mind because I'm so used to seeing people that look just like me on all these stages, and I'm like, where are the white people? Like, what happened to my white people? And it was so brilliantly done, too. I mean, it was just, I thought it was great. And, the people who were the, judges for these different things were all from St. Louis and different, walks of life that were on the, judging thing, which you should be on that. And I think it was pretty astonishing. The whole experience was pretty amazing. So those are some of the really good things. I mean, I think, I know we're here, but Contemporary Art Museum just does groundbreaking exhibits. And
shout out to Cam.
And shout out because really, it's not a permanent collection, so you never know what, you're going to just see such and Lisa got so many people here who weren't famous yet, who, for example, did Michelle Obama's portrait, So we have a lot going on. I mean, the Grand Center, the Kranzbergs are, they're the patron angels of the arts. They really are. And, we have the Visionary Awards, which Kim Eberlein and I brought back, and that's at the Sun Theater, and it showcases these great young women. It's all about women, every year. Women artists who are visionaries, and many of whom we don't even know what they're doing. People nominate, and we're like, who are these incredible? And for the first time, we really are lifting up diverse artists, and that's been a big thrill. So I just wanted to put a plug in for the St. Louis Visionary Awards for women in the arts.
No, that's awesome, because I think that's what it's about. I mean, even thinking about, what this podcast was meant to do, it's meant to uplift the stories and the individuals that are here in our city that make up that cultural fabric. And so, I think that's definitely in line with, the thoughts around what you all are doing with the Visionary Awards. It's individuals that might have not been recognized for their work otherwise. That is happening there. That's what, the podcast is about. It's not only the impact of what happens in St. Louis, because all of these things were happening, in East St. Like that was the core of, where she resided at, where these ideas and these challenging perspectives were being formed, but then to be able to take that internationally as well too. So just really getting back to the things that happen in this region and the city impact not just us, but it challenges the world as well too. And so just to be able to share in that legacy of what Ms. Dunham has done, and not only what all the other Dunham elders have done, but now to be able to be a part of that is really special. And so thank you for doing that work. Thank you for sharing the story, and putting individuals like myself in place to be able to take advantage of, the power sharing that you're doing. It's really important.
It's It's totally my pleasure. I do think my last thing I would leave you some advice, which is to always tell stories, and that's what you're doing. You're letting people tell their stories, and we're all hooked to our phones, and people don't really pass on these great stories. So I thank you for doing that, because I think these voices are totally important, really impactful.
So I have a two-part question that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
And so my two-part question is one, what do you love most about St. Louis? And the second part is, what would you most like to see change?
Oh, wow. I guess in terms of what I love most is, personally, I feel really part of a vibrant arts community, which is my own little community, with dinners and people and exchanging ideas, kind of like salons. But what I do love is like all the different things that are going on with young people, and that gives me hope, and that's what I love, is that St. Louis seems to be starting to be a breeding ground for new ideas, new, young people, and so that's what I love. And there's some food I love. There are some really good food. What don't I like?
Well, not what don't you like, is what more you like to see change, because there's a lot we don't like.
No. Well, I'm sure this won't surprise you, but, I would really like to see, I would just really like to see people have dinner together, get to know each other, listen to each other's stories, learn about each other from a sincere friendship thing, not because you work together, not because you met over here, but because you've made an intentional effort to be part of a diverse community that you have to realize is going to make your life so much better. That's what I'd like to see, is more people doing that.
Wow. Well, I look forward to the next dinner invite then from you
Anytime.
yourself.
Anytime, as long as I don't have to cook.
Of course, we all know that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
thank you so much, Sara, for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.